So welcome to the first Mercury retrograde of 2025. This time it's from Aries to Pisces, and Mercury is going to be retrograde from March 15th until April 7th of 2025. And if you've been following me for any amount of time, you know that this time in this year is really, really important. So in this video, I'm going to explain the Mercury retrograde to you, why it's so important, and of course at the end, I'm going to be going over how exactly it's going to be affecting your zodiac sign. Okay, so this Mercury retrograde video I'm doing is actually going to be a little bit different from how I'm usually doing it. And that's because this isn't a usual Mercury retrograde. Why I'm saying that is because this is a Mercury retrograde with a Venus retrograde. It's going from the first degrees of Aries into the last degrees of Pisces, and so is everything else. For the next couple of weeks and even months, everything is doing this at the last degrees of Pisces and the first degrees of Aries. We're going to have Venus retrograde in Aries into Pisces. We're going to have eclipses at the end of Pisces. We're going to have Mercury retrograde at the end of Pisces and the beginning of Aries. We're going to have Saturn there at the end of Pisces and the beginning of Aries. We're going to have Neptune move from the end of Pisces into the beginning of Aries. See, I'm getting like even confused with how much is all just happening right there. So I'm not just going to look at this Mercury retrograde as just a Mercury retrograde, but something bigger. What this Mercury retrograde really is an ushering in of things. Think of it this way. You have a big party that you're going to be hosting. You have a lot of guests coming over, and you haven't even gotten ready, and the party's in a couple hours. This Mercury and Venus retrograde is rethinking this whole area of your chart, whatever house Aries rules in your chart, and it's getting it ready and getting it prepared for the big transits, which are Saturn and Neptune going into this sign. And so the Venus retrograde, which I have a whole video about that you can watch here, but the Mercury retrograde and the Venus retrograde, like Venus is much more about like a reevaluation, but Mercury retrograde is like getting your head in the game. Here's like the mental focus part of it. So what I'm going to do really quickly is just go over the major highlights of this Mercury retrograde so you guys know what's going on. I'm going to give you the rundown of what this actually is and how to use it, and then we're going to be going over how it's going to be affecting your zodiac sign. Okay, so number one, Mercury enters shadow on March 1st of 2025 at 26 degrees Pisces. Pretty much all you need to do here is think back to this day and what was going on and what was being explained. And maybe you don't remember, but that's okay. But this is when it entered shadow. So this is where you're going to start seeing problems and miscommunications and essentially what the Mercury retrograde will be about. You're going to start seeing those themes of it start on the 1st. And also on the 1st, Mercury is going to be conjoining the North Node, and it will be conjoining Neptune the next day on the 2nd. And a lot of this is just, if Mercury is about communication and logic and rationale, on top, and it's in detriment in Pisces, by the way. I don't know if you guys know that, but Mercury's in detriment in Pisces. Mercury on the North Node is just a lot of saying, like a lot of words, but nothing really meaning much. The North Node turns everything up to an extreme. So Mercury conjoining the North Node is just a lot of loud noises, a lot of miscommunications, a lot of just having to say things even if they don't mean much. And Mercury conjoining Neptune is misunderstandings and confusion and mysticism over like what is being said, what is being told to me, what are your plans? Because again, Mercury rules communication, logic, rationale, thinking, and plans. But when Mercury goes into Aries on March 3rd, this is just having the clarity, being able to say it with your chest, and just not being worried about it being misunderstood or being confused. You're just saying it very clearly and very aggressively, probably. Then we get to March 11th, and Mercury's going to conjoin Venus, and this is mostly about the Venus retrograde stuff, where we're going to get a little bit more insight as to like what the whole Venus retrograde thing is. But Mercury actually stations retrograde on March 15th, and this is when the delays and the rethinking and the miscommunications actually happen. Now, again, I'm just going over the transit dates right now, and then I'm going to go over how to actually look at this. So if you feel like I'm not going over stuff, just give me another second. I'm doing this for a reason, so just hold on. So March 15th, Mercury goes retrograde, right? We start doing the delays, the slowdown, the rethinking, you start seeing problems. But then we get to the 24th, and that's when the Mercury retrograde cazimi happens, which is the halfway point of the cazimi. And this is the clarity moment, the aha moment. This is the going, oh, I now see what the problem is. Therefore, I now know what the solution is. And so March 24th is really the big day of being like, okay, this is what we're doing from here on out. Then on the 29th, Mercury is going to retrogress back into Pisces, where everything's confusing again. Then Mercury is going to conjoin Neptune, also on the 29th, where again, everything's confusing, except on March 30th, Neptune moves into Aries. This is a big thing. You have Neptune and Saturn and the North Node and Venus retrograde in Pisces, and now Mercury retrograde in Pisces. So whatever Pisces rules in your chart is getting very uncertain and confusing and overwhelming. And then when Neptune leaves, it stops being confusing and overwhelming. That's kind of a big thing. Then Mercury, as its retrograde, will conjoin the North Node at 27 degrees Pisces on April 4th. And then it stations direct on April 7th, where everything kind of gets worked out. We're done going backwards and we can start moving forward. Well, and then Mercury is going to conjoin the North Node again at 27 degrees Pisces. That will happen on April 11th. Then Mercury enters Aries again on April 16th. It will conjoin Neptune at 0 degrees Aries, which is also a big deal on April 16th. And then it doesn't leave shadow until April 26th. So this whole Mercury retrograde bonanza is from the very beginning of March till the very end of April. So let's actually get into like what this is about. Here's what's going on. Like, I can't just be like, oh, this is with Mercury retrograde in Aries, we're rethinking, the way that we're doing things. We just got done with a Mars retrograde. Mars is retrograding in Leo, and Mars being in Leo is about pride and courage, and Mars went retrograde in Leo where we lost that pride, we lost that courage, we had our tail tucked between our legs. And Mars was in Cancer where we felt insecure, and now Mars is stationing direct where we still feel a little bit insecure, but we're slowly moving forward. And now that we're slowly moving forward, Mars is about to go into Leo again. When it goes into Leo, it's going to trine Neptune, it's going to go opposite Pluto. And if you've been following me for any amount of time, April and May, and really even June of 2025 is really like a lot of breakthrough energy. It's really about like whatever we were doing in November, December, we kind of had some courage for, but we kind of lost the wind. We felt a little bit discouraged. And these few months of January and February and March are about kind of building up that courage again. With Mercury retrograding in Aries, number one, this is rethinking our battle plans. We are about to go into battle. We are about to go into war. Think about this for your own personal life. And what is your strategy for war? Is it being a wimpy loser, or is it saying, you know what, I'm going to conquer my enemy. I'm going to win this battle because I have to. Because that's what's really going on. Mars is in Cancer. Mars rules Aries. So Mars is kind of dictating this Mercury retrograde. And Mars is in Cancer where it's very defensive and it's very insecure. But when Mars goes into Leo, which again, Mars will go into Leo during this Mercury retrograde phase. In fact, Mars will go into Leo and then Mercury will make this like quasi trine to it. And Mercury essentially leaves shadow when Mars goes into Leo. So by the end of this Mercury retrograde, it's like all of a sudden we feel like we've conquered something. All of a sudden we feel victorious. So there's an aspect about it that is about our battle plans. There's an aspect about it that is like, hey, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? And can we think of it greater? Can we think of it better rather than just being insecure and defensive and playing from a not strategic position? The second part of this Mercury retrograde is about an initiation for Saturn and Neptune to go into Aries. And look, I'm going to keep talking about Saturn, Neptune, and Aries for a while. So if I'm just kind of glossing over it, that's fine because it's not something that I'm just going to be able to cover in just one video thoroughly. But you have to understand Venus is retrograding in Aries. Venus retrogrades are about reevaluation, and it's in Aries. Aries is about like what we're attacking, what we're starting, what we're ambitious for. And Venus is realizing whatever this part of our chart Aries rules, we're not liking it anymore. There's something about it that we're not really all that into. And Mercury stationing retrograde in Aries is thinking, okay, well, if I'm changing the way that I feel about this area, I should change the way that I think about this area. And this is where it comes down to logistics, where it comes to our thought process, where it comes to how we communicate in this area. And that could be to others or to ourselves. So the Mercury retrograde is like the Venus in the Mercury retrograde is getting our hearts and our minds ready for Saturn and Neptune. Neptune is going to enter Aries and it's going to enter a new part of your chart. And if you want to know what that's about, subscribe below because I'm going to have a video about how Neptune and Aries is going to be affecting you. And we'll talk more about this. But Neptune is about idealization and romanticizing things, and it's moving into Aries, into a new part of your chart where this area of your chart is about to get blown into a whole new perspective. It's going to be very romanticized. It's going to be very extremely different, and it's going to be a little weird because as Neptune goes into Aries and it starts to get confusing and starts to get kind of overwhelming, in May, Saturn's going to enter Aries where reality comes crashing down. And we have the planet of reality and we have the planet of mysticism and visualization and confusion together in this zodiac sign. And so you just need to look at where your chart is at, where Aries is at, because there's nothing but major changes there. And this Mercury retrograde is going, oh, wow, I have a lot of guests coming over for a party. Do I have enough chairs? Do I have enough tables? Do I have enough drinks? Where do I need to rearrange things to have all of these guests here? And as Mercury goes back into Pisces, this is when you kind of go, okay, for example, you might have your battle plans ready to go. You might say, you know what, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and this is how it's all going to work out. But you're going to get to a point where the more that you try to plan it and the more that you try to say, you know what, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, the more it's not going to work. Mercury's in detriment in Pisces, and it's going to station direct there. Mercury stationing direct phases are about all of the problems going away. We handle all of the problems, and we get to move forward from here on out. When Mercury stations direct in Pisces, we're going to realize, you know what? We can't plan out everything. We have to just call audibles. We have to just deal with it as it comes, and we have to just trust that process. And that's Actually, I think the hardest part about this whole Mercury retrograde phase is Mercury retrograding in Aries is like, I need to change my battle plans. I need to go into this. But what you really realize is you go, you know what? I need to just be more open and receptive and adaptable with how I actually go about things, rather than, because you might have a plan, and then as you have that plan, things might go awry. But if you stick to that plan, it might be harder and harder, versus if you're able to be adaptable, if you're able to be mutable, if you're able to change things as they go along, you might be in a more advantageous position. That's what this Mercury retrograde is about. This Mercury retrograde is not about, yes, there's going to be delays and there's going to be miscommunications. We will talk about that in the Zodiac portion, but really this Mercury retrograde is about readjusting our mindset into what is next. And let's also think of it from this perspective. Mercury is going to be retrograding at the first degrees of Aries, and Aries is all about new beginnings and rebirth, and Pisces, which Pisces, the end degrees of Pisces is all about endings. So we are going in and out of the spirit world. We are going into the underworld and into the heavens, which that's what Mercury does. Mercury is all about communication, and it's literally like Hermes goes in between the underworld and, you know, the real world essentially. And that's essentially what Mercury's doing. We're going to get information from the underworld. We're going to get information from the heavens, and we're going to be going back and forth. And so mentally, this is just going to be a wild time, but this isn't just like a Mercury retrograde. This is everything going in between Aries and Pisces, and it's just like this for a long time. It almost reminds me of the opening scene to Home Alone, where everyone's rushing around, getting ready to go for the trip, and where is everything and where is everybody? It's just very chaotic. And so it's not just a Mercury retrograde. You're going to hear people be like, oh, this Mercury retrograde's so tough. It's so much more than that. And you can blame things on the Mercury retrograde, but it's just a bigger deal than that. And the last thing that I really want to say is take this time seriously, because there's a lot of changes that are happening with or without your consent. And you have an opportunity to really rethink an area of your life, an area of your chart that's about to get smacked with a whole bunch of new energy. So be open-minded with how that looks. And that's what I'm about to explain as we go into the Zodiac portion of this. Aries, Mercury's going to be retrograding from your first house to your 12th house. This is really a rethinking of your identity and seeing how you get in your own way. The first house about yourself, your body, and your image. There's a lot of changes that are happening there, but you're probably going to miscommunicate something. There's going to be some delays in the things that you want to do. And it's really about understanding that you might be getting in your way a little bit more. And the more that you understand how you're getting in your way, the faster and easier all of the changes that you want to happen are going to happen. But a lot of this Mercury retrograde is going to be just delays and miscommunications, probably with coworkers and employees, maybe even pets and health stuff. There's a health aspect to it here too, where again, you're not going to get cancer, but the idea being you might get a little sick, and that's going to cause some delays and stuff. But the idea really being here is miscommunications that you start, that you have, and that you have to kind of rethink yourself. Taurus, this Mercury retrograde is happening in your 12th house of isolation, alienation, the subconscious, fears, phobias, and your 11th house of friends. There's a lot of movement going on between your friendships and your hidden enemies part of your chart. And I think this Mercury retrograde is just kind of emphasizing that. Mercury does rule your second house of money, and it also rules your fifth house of art, music, recreation. And so there just might be a miscommunication or a falling out with a friend based off of money or resources, and or going out, partying, having fun, shared activities. There's just going to be a kind of a realization that maybe not everyone that is around you is your friend right now, but that's also just the wider scope of what's going on for you in general. For the Gemini risings, Mercury is your ruling planet, so it is much more important than usual. And Mercury also rules your fourth house of home and family. So Mercury is always going to be dealing with stuff about you, yourself, and your body, as well as your living situation and your parents. Now, Mercury is going to be retrograding in your 11th house of friends and community and networks, back into your 10th house of career. Look, a lot of this time is about major shifts back and forth from your 10th house of career and friendships, whether it's your friends introduce you to a new job, you make new friends because of a new job, you're changing your job, therefore you're changing your friends, you might be moving back somewhere, and so then going back to old friends or going back to an old job. That's the main part of this. As Mercury retrogrades in your 11th house, there's delays and miscommunications and probably arguments with friends. Your 11th ruler of friends is Mars, and it's in Cancer, and it's in your second house of money, so there could be issues around money dealing with friendships. But essentially, a lot of this is a miscommunication and a rethinking of who your friends are based off of your living situation and based off your work and your career. For the Cancer risings, if you're like a member on my website, I've been just saying this forever. You guys just have like a lot of career changes going on. And I just feel like the Mercury retrograde part of it is just like more of the reality coming in. Mercury does rule your 12th house of things like hidden enemies and self-sabotage and stuff like that. But it's retrograding in your 10th house of career, but then it's going back in your 9th house of like education and publishing and broadcasting. It's also like Mercury just ruling your third house. Like, look, you guys just have a lot of career changes going on. And again, I've even gotten comments and people are like, well, I'm unemployed. What does that mean? It's like, by the time we get to May, you're going to be in a different career position. I would say really actually by June, like I'd rather let May happen, but by June. But this Mercury retrograde kind of starts it. There's going to be some delays and miscommunications with your work and your career that might set off the transition of you guys changing your jobs. Leo, Mercury is retrograding in your ninth house of spirituality, religion, publishing, broadcasting, far distance travel, beliefs, your relationship with God. Mercury rules your 11th house of friends, and it rules your second house of money. So there's some delays and some rethinking related to money, finances, and resources, related to traveling, related to your belief systems, related to publishing and broadcasting, and even things like social media. Mercury also rules your 11th house of friendship. So there's going to be some miscommunications and some delays and maybe some arguments with friendships. So the other thing is Mercury's moving into your 8th house of other people's resources. And so there's going to be some kind of issues and some miscommunications related to money and your money and other people's money, what you owe, what you don't owe, what you're giving, what you're taking, and everything like that. But right now, I feel like Mercury stationing in your ninth house is rethinking your beliefs about money, and then therefore having to work things out related to whether you have any debts, shared resources, other people's money, your partner, your spouse's money, and things like that. Virgo, Mercury is your ruling planet, so that means it's very important for you, yourself, your body, your image, what you look like, health things, even that too. Mercury also rules your 10th house of career. And so whatever Mercury's doing is just generally a bigger deal for you. And Mercury's retrograding in your 8th house of other people's resources, shared resources, death, debt, and inheritance. So there's just going to be some rethinking of that area and some delays of that area. But Mercury is going to come back into your 7th house of relationships. Really, right now is like a big time with relationships, but that could just be because of like getting in and out of one. But also like, let's say if like you're getting out of one, and you guys have shared resources together, this is some delays and issues with the shared resources part. Like who's getting the kid, who's getting the dog, how long are we on the lease for, that sort of a thing. That's how I really look at this Mercury retrograde, but a lot of that gets kind of solved within relationships by the end of it. Libra, Mercury is retrograding into your 7th house of relationships, and it will retrogress back into your 6th house of work, labor, health, pets, day-to-day activities. Mercury rules your 12th house of like self-sabotage, hidden enemies, fears, phobias, and it also rules your 9th house of beliefs. So like, look, you might miscommunicate something, or your relationship might miscommunicate something to you. You guys have a lot of relationship stuff going on right now. And this is just more of the miscommunication, mental change part of it. When Mercury goes into your 6th house though, all of that kind of gets addressed more with health and with work. Like your 12th ruler of self-sabotage and like hidden enemies is going into your 6th house of ill health and work and detriment. So I look at this as like, is there something that you're fucking around with at work? Are you missing work? Are you sick so you're not going to work? And does that cause issues with relationships? But a big thing too is this is really changing your mindset and really rethinking your relationships. Saturn's about to go into your 7th house of relationships. Neptune's about to go into your 7th house of relationships. There's a lot of significant change there. And Mercury retrograding is just the time where you're rethinking this whole area and having to have the conversations that you need to have with relationships. Scorpio, Mercury is stationing retrograde in your 6th house of work, labor, health, and routine. So there's going to be some delays and miscommunications here. That's already been happening with the Venus retrograde stuff. But Mercury does station direct in your 5th house of love, romance, sex, pleasure, art, music, recreation. Here's the issue. Mercury rules your 11th house of friends and networks, but it also rules your 8th house of other people's resources and shared resources. And it retrograding in your 6th house is like something to do with your friends and your networks, and there being some work opportunity there or some work change there, as well as their resources, your friends' resources, and how does that shift and how does that change your work and your labor? Like, this is important to understand. Your 10th house is the title that you wear, and the 6th house is the labor that goes into it. So it's not like, it may be the title changing, and that's actually something that will happen a little bit later on, but it's more so of like your day-to-day routines and your day-to-day work. That also might change because of health. Like there might just be a little bit of a delay. The hard issue that is hard to always parse for me is, well, Mercury's going back into your 5th house of like love and romance and sex and pleasure and kids and creativity. So it's like somehow there's a needing to be creative, or friendship stuff and going out gets solved in some way. I don't really know. I'd be more curious in the comments below what the Scorpio risings are kind of going through in terms of things that are related to, again, work, labor, health, pets, as well as love, romance, sex, pleasure, art, music, recreation, children, drugs, alcohol, vices, partying, things like that. Because those two things are really intermingled with friendships and with other people's resources. Sagittarius, Mercury is retrograding in your 5th house of love, romance, sex, pleasure, art, music, recreation, and children, as well as your 4th house of home and family and living situation. Mercury rules your 10th house of your career and your 7th house of relationships. So this is more important for you than most other signs, including, like, I would say it's also important for, again, like Gemini and Virgo. But because Mercury rules your 7th house, there's some sort of miscommunication and delays with relationships related to love, romance, sex, pleasure, art, music, recreation, and kids, miscommunications and delays, but also career stuff too. And what other creative adventures that you have or creativity that you could put in there or fun that you could put in there. Now, a lot of this is just a mental attitude shift, and a lot of that is going to come into what's going on with your living situation, what's going on at home, and what pieces need to be just kind of slapped together at home in order for a lot more of the creative stuff to really shine, and a lot of the fun stuff shine in both your career and your relationships. So for the Capricorns, Mercury's stationing retrograde in your 4th house. Like, look, you guys have the 2 Capricorn risings I can think of have a lot of living situation stuff changing, and a lot of the Mercury retrograde is like the documentation and the paperwork stuff, like paperwork part of it just happening. And that's the way I look at it. Mercury does rule your 9th house of like spirituality, religion, and beliefs, and it also rules your 6th house of work and labor and health. So these 2 areas are dealing with delays and miscommunications because of the living situation stuff. Again, maybe you got to put off work because of living situation stuff or parent stuff, like family stuff, or vice versa. There's issues with your house, and so therefore there's like issues with work stuff. That's the way I would look at it. But Mercury is going to retrograde into your 3rd house of short distance travel, siblings, neighbors, neighborhood. And I think as Mercury goes back into there, there's like a readjusting of your living situation based off your neighborhood. But this is also one of those things too, where, like I said this for the Scorpio risings, I would want the Capricorn risings to actually comment below, because like this is just research for me as an astrologer. Like, what the fuck is going on with like your neighborhood or your siblings or like your other wider family members? Because I guess I just lack the creative thinking in terms of like what this would actually look like. Aquarius, Mercury is going to be retrograding in your 3rd house of short distance travel, neighbors, siblings, cars, communication, as well as your 2nd house of money. Now, the big thing here is Mercury rules your 8th house of other people's resources, and it's going to be retrogressing into your 2nd house of your money. So there's like this working back and forth with like debts and inheritance and what other resources you have access to for your own cash pile. Like, I look a lot of this as like moving stuff or trying to get like, or another way would be like liquidating assets or finding ways to get a hold of actual cash, whether that's via debt or something like that. But Mercury is retrograding in your 3rd house. So there's going to be some miscommunications related to siblings, neighbors, greater family members. In my monthly rising sign horoscopes that I did for my members, I kind of talked a little bit about like this could even be like an 8th house thing is like death, and it's in your 3rd house of like siblings, aunts, uncles, cousins. And it doesn't always have to mean death, but it could just basically mean like, hey, finding someone to take care of someone else. Like maybe you have an older aunt that needs to be taken care of, and that could be a lot of like what's happening here and who's taking care of Aunt Sheila or whatever. But Mercury also rules your 5th house of like love, romance, sex, pleasure, and art, music, and recreation. And so there's a lot of like rethinking about your schedule and the amount of time that you put into the things that are fun for you, as well as spending money on those things. And then for the Pisces rising, Mercury rules both your 4th house of home and family and parents, as well as your 7th house of relationships. So this should be affecting you, the bigger parts of your life, a little bit more. Mercury is stationing retrograde in your 2nd house of money and finances and resources, and it's going to go back into your 1st house of yourself and your body. So there's a miscommunication and a delay related to finances and money, and that's going to be affecting your living situation, and it's going to be affecting relationships too. And this is all kind of happening at a bigger scale, right? Like Saturn's going to be going to your 2nd house. Neptune's going to be going to your 2nd house. There's a big shift with money happening. And the Mercury retrograde part of it is just like when the reality of things and the logistics of things finally catch up. But as Mercury goes direct into your 1st house, this is just like being able to be adaptable, being able to be open, and be able to just like work through it. And look, that's the Mercury retrograde for you guys. I'm assuming no one's watching this part. I think I've had 3 comments before saying people actually get to the very end. Like I said, this is a very interesting Mercury retrograde, and I'm not just going to be like, oh, this isn't just a Mercury retrograde. It's so much more than that. And again, I'm going to have a video. I already have a video about the Venus retrograde. I'm going to have a video about Neptune in Aries. I'm going to have a video about Saturn in Aries, where we're really going to get more of the juice. I just wanted to cover this part of this time because the Mercury retrograde is so much, it's very minor, but it's a very important piece of a bigger picture. So with that being said, I love and appreciate you guys, and I'll be seeing you next time.